The Mafia boss took the black maid as his fake companion to a secret meeting, and she exposed a deadly lie. Naomi Carter, a humble and hard-working maid, had been serving in the mansion of Dominic Romano, a powerful Mafia boss, for nearly 2 years. She never asked questions, never pried into the business that seemed to swirl around her every day. Her life was simple: work, eat, and send money back home to her ailing mother. But today, something felt different. It wasn't just another typical morning. Naomi was on her way to deliver a tray of coffee to Dominic's office when she noticed something strange. The door to the study was slightly ajar, and through the small crack, she could see him, a figure that commanded the room even in silence. Dominic Romano, the youngest Mafia boss in the city, was seated at his massive desk, his back to her. His posture was tense, a man used to power but showing an unexpected vulnerability today. Naomi had learned to read the little signs, the subtle shifts in Dominic's usual cold demeanor. As she stepped closer, she felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. She could sense something wasn't right. As she placed the coffee on his desk, Naomi caught a glimpse of papers strewn across his desk: contracts, figures, names. One sheet caught her eye, half hidden under the others. Something about the contract didn't seem right. She could only see part of the text, but the words exclusivity clause and binding arbitration stood out like red flags in her mind. She had no idea what the full implications were, but she knew enough to recognize that this was not a standard business contract. As Naomi reached for the papers, a sudden voice broke her concentration. "What are you doing?" Dominic's voice was sharp, but not angry. Naomi froze. Her heart raced, and she quickly stepped back, stammering, "I was just cleaning the desk, sir." She tried to compose herself, but Dominic's eyes, cold and piercing, scanned her as if he could see right through her. "You don't need to clean the desk, but you've caught my attention." He motioned for her to sit down, and Naomi, though confused and anxious, obeyed. The tension in the room was palpable. Dominic, the man who controlled empires, sat across from her, studying her every move. Naomi felt her palms sweat, but there was something about the way he was looking at her, something different. It was as if he saw her for the first time. "You noticed something, didn't you?" he asked, his voice quieter now, more measured. Naomi nodded slowly, unable to stop herself from speaking the truth. "There's a clause in the contract. It's not right. It could tie you up in legal trouble." Dominic raised an eyebrow. "You know about contracts?" Naomi hesitated for a moment before replying. I used to work at a law firm, sir, before I took this job. I learned a thing or two." Dominic leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "You were a lawyer?" Naomi shook her head. "Not exactly. I didn't get far. But I remember the contracts. And I can see this one is a trap." Dominic studied her, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he stood and walked over to the papers, picking up the contract that Naomi had pointed out. He scanned it, his eyes narrowing as he saw the hidden clauses Naomi had exposed. For a moment, he was silent, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but filled with respect. "You just saved me a lot of trouble, Naomi." Naomi couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had never expected this. The man who controlled everything, the man who ruled with an iron fist, was actually acknowledging her. He was thanking her. It was surreal. "You're not just a maid, are you?" Dominic asked, his tone shifting. Naomi, still in shock, looked up at him, meeting his gaze. "No, sir. I'm not." She had no idea what this moment meant, but one thing was clear: her life was about to change forever. Naomi sat there, her mind still spinning from the unexpected turn of events. Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss she had known only as a distant, powerful figure, had just thanked her, acknowledged her intelligence in a way that felt surreal. She had saved him from a potentially disastrous legal trap, a dangerous situation that could have torn his empire apart. But what did it mean for her? She had never expected her simple job as a maid to lead to such a pivotal moment. The room felt heavy with silence as Dominic leaned against his desk, staring at her, his sharp gaze never leaving her face. His voice was calm, but carried a sense of intrigue. "You knew what was in that contract. I can tell you're no ordinary maid." Naomi didn't know how to respond. She had always kept her past hidden, buried deep inside her. No one at the mansion knew her real story. To them, she was just another employee, a servant in the grand scheme of things. But here, in this room, Facing Dominic, everything felt different. She cleared her throat and spoke, her voice steady despite the nervous energy buzzing inside her. I used to work in a law firm, sir. It didn't last long, but I learned enough to know when something's wrong. Dominic's eyes narrowed as he listened intently. And yet you've chosen to live like this? He asked, his tone almost rhetorical. Naomi hesitated for a moment, the weight of his question lingering in the air. Life doesn't always give you the choices you want, she replied quietly. Dominic studied her, his expression softening. For the first time, Naomi saw a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. It was a stark contrast to the cold, calculating man she had known for so long. You've been hiding your true potential, haven't you? He mused. Naomi didn't answer, but the truth was there, hanging between them. She had been hiding, not just from him, but from herself. Her past, her education, the person she could have been, all hidden beneath the surface of her current life. Dominic broke the silence. I'm offering you something, Naomi. Something I don't offer many people. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what he was about to say, but something told her that whatever came next would change everything. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I want you to work for me, Naomi, he said, his tone steady. Not as a maid. Not as a servant. I need someone who can think, someone who sees the bigger picture. You've already proven you have that ability. Naomi's mind raced. This was a moment she hadn't anticipated. She had always thought of herself as nothing more than a means to an end for people like Dominic, an invisible worker in the background of his world. But here he was, offering her a role that could change her entire life. What kind of work are you asking for? She asked, unsure whether to be flattered or frightened. I need someone to help me with more than just the day-to-day tasks, Dominic replied, his voice lower now, more serious. I need someone to help me with the things others don't see, the things that matter. You're more than capable of that. Naomi's heart raced as she processed his words. She had never considered that she could be more than just a maid. She had always assumed her place in life was fixed, that she would always be in the shadows of people like Dominic. But now, in this moment, everything felt different. Why me? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dominic gave her a half-smile. Because you saw the truth when no one else did. You're the one who figured out what was really in that contract. That's more than just a maid's job. Naomi felt a surge of conflicting emotions, fear, excitement, doubt, all swirling inside her. She had always dreamed of a life where she didn't have to hide, where she could be seen for her intellect and her worth. But was this the opportunity she had been waiting for, or was it just another trap in a world she didn't fully understand? I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's gaze softened, his expression unreadable. You don't have to decide right now, but I want you to think about it, Naomi. This is a chance to change everything. He turned to walk towards the window, his back to her. The moment felt surreal, like something out of a dream. Naomi had never imagined a moment like this would come. She had never imagined that she would find herself standing on the edge of something so life-altering. She had always been just Naomi Carter, the maid who had learned to keep her head down and survive. But now, in this room, she felt like something else entirely. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like it was hers to shape. Dominic's voice broke through her thoughts, bringing her back to reality. Think carefully, Naomi. Your life can be whatever you make of it. I'm offering you a chance to choose. Naomi nodded slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. This was more than just a job offer. This was a turning point, a chance to take control of her life in a way she never thought possible. Naomi walked out of Dominic Romano's office, her mind still spinning from the conversation. His offer, his words, kept echoing in her head. You're more than capable of that. The weight of those words made her heart race. For the first time in her life, someone, a powerful man like Dominic, had seen something in her that she had buried deep down. She wasn't just Naomi Carter, the maid. She was more than that. But what did that really mean? Could she accept his offer? Could she risk everything for something she had never dared to dream of? As she made her way to the staff quarters, Naomi's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to find Dominic approaching, his usual stoic expression now replaced by something softer, something almost uncertain. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze locked on hers. I know this is a lot to take in, he said, his voice calm. but there was an edge of concern there. Naomi didn't know what to say. She had never been in a position like this before. "I never thought I would be in this position," she finally said, her voice quieter than usual. "You don't have to decide right now," Dominic replied, his tone reassuring. "But I want you to know that I'm serious. You've earned my respect today, Naomi, and I think you could be valuable in ways you haven't even realized." Naomi took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. This was more than just a job offer. This was a chance to step into a world she had never imagined, a world filled with power, danger, and strangely, a sense of possibility. "I need some time to think," Naomi said, her voice trembling slightly. Dominic nodded, his expression softening. "Of course, take all the time you need. But just know, this isn't an offer I make lightly." He gave her a final, steady look before turning and walking away. Naomi stood there for a moment, staring at the spot where he had been. The weight of the moment was heavy. She had spent her life in the shadows, keeping her head down, doing her job, and nothing more. But now, standing at the threshold of something new, she felt the stirrings of something she had never allowed herself to feel before. The possibility of change. The possibility of choosing her own path. As Naomi sat down in her small room later that evening, she thought back to the woman she had been before coming to the mansion, the woman who had fought for every little bit of her life, who had struggled to make ends meet. But that woman wasn't her anymore. Not now, not after everything that had happened. She could feel the weight of Dominic's words in her chest. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was someone with potential, someone with power, someone who had the ability to make a difference. But could she step into that role? Could she leave behind the life she had known and embrace something that felt so foreign? She closed her eyes and tried to imagine what her future could look like. She saw herself standing in that same office, not as a maid, but as something more, an equal, perhaps. Could she really change her life this way? Naomi stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city below. The streets were alive with movement, the cars and people flowing in different directions, all with their own stories. She had been just another face in the crowd, just another invisible worker in the shadows. But now, for the first time, she felt seen. For the first time, she felt that her life could be more. And maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to change it all. The decision weighed heavily on her mind as the night stretched on. She knew that whatever she chose, it would change everything. There would be no going back. But as she gazed out at the city, Naomi realized something. She had always been afraid of what lay beyond the familiar walls of her life. But now, she wasn't so sure. Maybe it was time to take the leap. Maybe it was time to step into the world that Dominic had shown her. As the moonlight filtered through her window, Naomi made her decision. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to find out. Naomi spent the next few days in a haze, her mind racing with the implications of her decision. She had never been one to make bold moves, always content to stay within the boundaries of her routine, her life as a maid, a simple existence that allowed her to survive, but never truly live. But now, everything had changed. Dominic's offer still lingered in her mind, like an open door that led to an unknown future. Every time she thought about it, the possibility of stepping into a new role, a new life, seemed both thrilling and terrifying. She had always known that she was more than just the woman who cleaned the mansion's floors, more than the invisible worker who went unnoticed by everyone around her. But could she really leave everything behind? Could she embrace the chance to be something more than just Naomi Carter, the maid? It was late in the evening when Dominic called for her. He didn't give her much warning, but she knew it was time. The moment of truth had arrived. She stepped into his office, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Dominic was seated behind his desk, his usual commanding presence filling the room. But there was something different about him tonight. He wasn't the cold, calculating Mafia boss she had always known. Tonight, he was softer, more human. He looked up as she entered, his eyes meeting hers with a steady gaze that made her heart flutter in her chest. "Naomi," he said, his voice low and serious, "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I want to know if you're ready to make a decision." Naomi felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. This was it. The moment she had been avoiding, the moment when she would have to choose whether to step into a world that was completely foreign to her. She had always been a fighter, always found a way to survive, but this was different. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about living. "I'm ready," Naomi said, her voice steady despite the nerves that threatened to overwhelm her. Dominic stood and walked around his desk, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. He stopped just a few feet away from her, his presence commanding yet somehow comforting. "Good," he said, his eyes softening just a fraction. "I'm glad to hear that." He paused for a moment, studying her as if weighing something important. "I need someone who can think for themselves, Naomi. Someone who can see beyond the surface. Someone who isn't afraid to stand up and do what's necessary. I think you're that person." Naomi felt a surge of emotion at his words. It wasn't the first time he had praised her intelligence, but this time, it felt different. It felt like he saw her, truly saw her, for the first time. She wasn't just a maid to him. She was someone with potential, someone who could make a difference. "I won't let you down," Naomi said, her voice filled with determination. Dominic nodded, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I know you won't." He turned toward the window, his back to her. "I'm offering you a chance to change your life, Naomi. But it's not going to be easy. It will require sacrifices, and it will require you to be more than you ever thought you could be." Naomi swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never been one to shy away from challenges, but this was different. She wasn't just entering a new job. She was entering a new world, one that was filled with danger, power, and ambition. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. "I understand," Naomi said, her voice steady. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes." Dominic turned to face her again, his expression serious. "Good. Because this is just the beginning. I need you to stay sharp, stay focused. This world is unpredictable, and things can change in an instant. But I believe in you, Naomi. I wouldn't be offering you this opportunity if I didn't." Naomi nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and excitement. This was her chance to step out of the shadows and into the light. "I won't disappoint you," she said, her voice filled with conviction. Dominic walked over to her, stopping just inches away. He studied her for a moment, his eyes searching hers as if to gauge her resolve. "I know you won't," he said quietly. "Welcome to the team, Naomi." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. It was official. She was no longer just the maid. She was something more. And for the first time, she felt like she could truly make a difference. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to face whatever came next, ready to step into a world of power, danger, and possibility. The question now was, could she handle the weight of it all? And could she handle what would come with being a part of Dominic Romano's world? She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear, her life would never be the same again. Naomi's first day in her new role felt like stepping into a world that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. She had spent years in the shadows, always just out of sight, doing her job and surviving. But now, as she entered the sleek, high-rise office of Dominic Romano, she couldn't help but feel like she was stepping into something much larger than herself. The soft hum of the city outside seemed distant, muffled by the thick glass windows of the penthouse. Naomi took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The polished marble floors gleamed under the soft lighting, the walls lined with luxurious art pieces that spoke of wealth and power. Dominic had said he needed her to help with more than just the mundane tasks. He wanted someone who could think critically, someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. Naomi wasn't sure what that would look like, but she was determined to prove herself. As she approached Dominic's office, she could feel the weight of her decision settle in her chest. She had made her choice, but now she had to live with it. She had to succeed. When she stepped inside, Dominic was already waiting, his sharp eyes locking onto hers as she entered. "Naomi," he greeted her, his voice calm but commanding. "I'm glad you're here. We have work to do." Naomi nodded, feeling the butterflies in her stomach. She was here to do something important, to be a part of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. "What can I do to help?" she asked, her voice steady, though inside, she was anything but calm. Dominic motioned for her to sit across from him at his desk. "I've been working on a project for the past few months. It's been a delicate operation, and I need someone who can look at it from a different perspective. Someone who can connect the dots when others can't." Naomi sat down, her eyes focused on him. "What kind of project?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "A partnership," he replied, his voice low and deliberate. "A deal with a rival family. But there are complications. hidden traps that no one else has seen. I need you to go through the paperwork, find the inconsistencies, and give me your assessment. Naomi's mind immediately went to the contracts she had seen before, the ones that had seemed so complicated and dangerous. She had no idea how far this would go, but something in Dominic's tone told her this was serious. I'm not a lawyer, she said, her voice hesitant but determined. But I'll look through everything and give you my honest opinion. Dominic studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. I trust you'll see things clearly, Naomi. You've already proven that you know how to spot the details others miss. Naomi felt a sense of pride swell in her chest, but she quickly pushed it aside. She couldn't afford to let her emotions get in the way. This was her chance, and she needed to make the most of it. For the next few hours, Naomi pored over the documents, her eyes scanning every word, every clause. It was complicated, far more than she had anticipated. There were hidden agreements, subtle shifts in language that suggested a power struggle, a tug-of-war between control and manipulation. It was like piecing together a puzzle, but the pieces didn't quite fit. She could feel the tension in the air as she worked, the weight of Dominic's expectations pressing down on her. Every now and then, she could sense him watching her, waiting for her to say something, to uncover the hidden truths within the pages. Finally, Naomi leaned back in her chair, her eyes scanning the documents one last time. She had found it, a clause buried deep within the contract, a loophole that would give the rival family the upper hand. It was subtle, almost hidden, but Naomi had seen it. She took a deep breath before walking over to Dominic's desk. He looked up as she approached, his gaze intense, almost waiting for her verdict. There's a clause, Naomi said, her voice steady, that gives them control of the entire deal if certain conditions are met. It's buried in the fine print, but it's a trap. If we sign this, we'll be at their mercy. Dominic's eyes narrowed as he looked at her, his expression darkening. You're sure about this? He asked, his voice sharp, though there was a hint of respect in his tone. Naomi nodded. I'm sure. This could destroy everything you've worked for. Dominic stood up, walking over to the window as he processed her words. He was quiet for a long moment, his back to her. Naomi could hear his breathing, slow and deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, but filled with an edge of determination. Good work, Naomi, he said. You've just saved us from a major disaster. Naomi felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had uncovered the truth, the thing that could have brought everything crashing down. But this was just the beginning. There was more to come, more risks to take, more decisions to make. What happens next? Naomi asked, her voice steady. Dominic turned to face her, his eyes intense. Now we prepare. We take control of this situation before it gets worse. And I'll need you by my side. We'll move fast, and we'll move smart. Naomi nodded, her resolve firm. She had stepped into a world of power and danger, but she was ready. She had proven herself, and now, she would fight for her place in this world. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Naomi was ready to face whatever came next. Naomi sat in the sleek, high-rise office, the weight of her decision still settling in. She had stepped into a world of danger, power, and complexity, but there was no turning back now. Dominic had made it clear. This was the path she had chosen, and she had proven she was capable of handling it. The documents were spread out before her, but her mind kept drifting back to the moment when she had uncovered the deadly clause that could have destroyed everything Dominic had built. It was a feeling of triumph, but also one of foreboding. She could already sense the ripple effect that this discovery would have. This was only the beginning. Dominic's voice broke through her thoughts. Naomi, I need you to understand something. What we've uncovered is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. We're dealing with a complex network of deals, alliances, and betrayals. And we're about to step right into the heart of it. Naomi turned to face him, her resolve solidifying. She had always thought of herself as an outsider in this world. A maid. A worker who moved through the background, unnoticed, invisible. But now, for the first time, she felt like she had a real role to play. She wasn't just part of the machinery anymore. She was going to be the one to help turn the gears. What do you need me to do next? She asked, her voice steady, though she could feel the pulse of anticipation in her chest. Dominic looked at her, his eyes sharp, calculating. I need you to go through the rest of the contracts, he said. Every single one. There's more where that came from. They're all connected. And once we expose what they're trying to hide, we'll be able to turn the tables in our favor. Naomi nodded, absorbing his words. This wasn't just about the business now. This was about power. Control. The kind of power that could change lives, destroy people, and build empires. She had already taken the first step into that world. Now, there was no turning back. Over the next few days, Naomi buried herself in the contracts. She worked late into the night, scanning every word, every clause. She didn't miss a single detail. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how deep the corruption ran. It wasn't just about one bad deal. It was about a system built on manipulation and deceit. But Naomi was no stranger to deception. She had learned early on in life how to navigate the shadows, how to survive by keeping her head down, staying quiet, and observing. Now, she was using those skills to her advantage. Each document she analyzed, each discovery she made, brought her closer to understanding the true extent of the web Dominic was tangled in. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together, and Naomi was beginning to see the bigger picture. It was more complicated than she had imagined. But the more she learned, the more she realized just how much power lay in the information she had. The next step was going to be the hardest. Dominic had been right. This wasn't just about uncovering secrets. It was about what they were going to do with that information. Naomi sat in front of Dominic once again, her eyes tired but sharp. She had spent hours poring over every contract, every detail. I found more, she said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of her discoveries. Dominic leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he listened. What did you find? Naomi took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. It's worse than I thought. The clauses are everywhere, hidden in every contract, every deal they've made. It's all connected. The rival family we're dealing with, they've been building a network for years. And the worst part is that they've been using our own people to get what they want. Dominic's face darkened as he absorbed her words. Naomi could see the wheels turning in his mind, the way he processed information, calculating his next move. He was a man who thrived on control, who understood the game better than anyone else. But this was a game with much higher stakes than he had anticipated. We need to move fast, he said, his voice low but filled with authority. If we expose this now, we can take control of the situation. But we need to be careful. One wrong move, and we could lose everything. Naomi nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She had come this far, and there was no going back. She had already stepped into the world of power and danger. Now, it was time to use what she knew to turn the tide in their favor. Dominic stood up and walked over to the window, his silhouette framed by the city lights outside. Naomi watched him, waiting for him to make the next move. You're ready for this, Naomi, he said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. I know you are. Naomi felt a rush of determination flood through her. She had already proven herself once, and now she was ready to do it again. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was an integral part of this operation, and she would fight for her place in this world. Dominic turned to face her, his expression serious. This is where things get real. We're going to take down the people who thought they could use us. But we have to be smart. We have to be precise. Naomi stood up, her eyes meeting his. She was ready. She had already stepped into the unknown, and now she was going to make sure they emerged victorious. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm and resolute. Dominic gave her a small nod of approval. Good. Let's get to work. Naomi took a deep breath and followed him, stepping into a world of power, secrets, and danger. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. She wasn't backing down now. Naomi sat in the conference room, the weight of the documents in front of her heavier than ever. The deal was now in full motion, and every decision she made from this moment forward would be crucial. Dominic had trusted her with an unprecedented responsibility. She was no longer just the maid. She had crossed into a world of power, influence, and high-stakes decisions. Her role had grown from observer to active participant, and Naomi could feel the enormity of the shift. The room buzzed with the low hum of the city outside, but inside, it was a world of quiet tension. Naomi's fingers traced the edges of the contract she had been reviewing for days. She had already identified several hidden clauses, subtle agreements buried within the fine print, and now, she was tasked with finding the missing piece. The final key to unlocking the full truth. Dominic had laid it all out for her. This wasn't just about taking down their rivals. It was about controlling the narrative, shifting the balance of power. Naomi understood that. She had seen enough of the manipulation in her life to know that power didn't come from what you saw on the surface. It came from what you could hide, what you could control in the shadows. Naomi knew she had to be smarter, more strategic than ever before. She needed to be the one who found that missing piece, the one that would give them leverage over their enemies. The clock ticked on, and Naomi's mind raced through the possibilities. She could feel the pressure mounting with every passing second. She was no longer just helping Dominic. She was shaping their future. Naomi. Dominic's voice broke through her thoughts, deep and calm, as usual. She looked up to see him standing at the door, his eyes locked onto her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Are you ready to make the move?" he asked. Naomi swallowed, a bead of sweat forming on her brow. "I think I've found it," she replied, her voice steady, despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. Dominic nodded, walking toward her, his movements deliberate, purposeful. He stopped beside her and looked down at the document. "You've done well," he said, his approval evident in his tone. Naomi felt a rush of pride, but it was fleeting. There was still much to be done. "What's the next step?" she asked, her eyes never leaving the contract. "We make sure it never sees the light of day," Dominic said quietly. "This isn't just about winning a battle. This is about ending the war before it begins." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. The weight of his words settled deep within her. "So, we use what we have against them?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Exactly. But remember, Naomi, this isn't just a deal. This is a statement. We do this, and we take control." Naomi nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She wasn't just helping to protect Dominic's empire anymore. She was helping to shape its future. The power they held now was in her hands, too. The room grew still as Naomi considered her next move. She had already uncovered the truth, the hidden clause that would give them the advantage. But it wasn't just about exposing the lie. It was about making sure it couldn't hurt them. She turned to Dominic. "I'll make the call," she said, her voice strong. "Good," he said, his tone approving. "Make sure you're ready. Once this is done, there's no turning back." Naomi took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She picked up the phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the number. The line rang once, twice, before the voice on the other end picked up. "This is Naomi Carter," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "I need you to do something for me. Make sure the documents never see the light of day." She paused, listening intently as the person on the other end spoke. "I don't care what it takes. It needs to be done, and it needs to be done now." She hung up the phone with a finality that sent a ripple of unease through her. It was done. There was no turning back now. Dominic's empire was secure, for now. But Naomi knew that this was just the beginning. She had crossed a line she could never uncross, stepped into a world that was as dangerous as it was thrilling. The weight of the decision settled on her shoulders, but it was no longer a burden. It was a challenge, one she was ready to face. As Naomi stood there, looking out over the city, she knew that she had made her mark. She wasn't just part of this world now. She was shaping it, moving the pieces on the board. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Naomi Carter was no longer invisible. She was a player in the game, and she was ready to play. Dominic's voice interrupted her thoughts once more. "You did good," he said, his tone approving. "Now, we take the next step." Naomi nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. There was no going back now. She had stepped into a world of power, and she wasn't about to back down. The future was hers to shape, and she would do whatever it took to win. Naomi sat in the dimly lit office, the glow of the city's lights filtering through the tall windows. The weight of the last few days pressed down on her. She had moved through the motions, uncovered the hidden clauses, made the calls, and helped shift the power in Dominic's favor. But now, she felt the silence settle in, the calm before the storm. Dominic had given her a role she never could have imagined, one that was crucial, one that could change everything. The sound of footsteps behind her pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Dominic standing in the doorway, his gaze steady, yet there was something different in his eyes tonight. A sense of anticipation, perhaps, or maybe it was the weight of the decisions that had been made. "Naomi," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge that made her stomach tighten. Are you ready for what comes next? Naomi didn't answer right away. She had been living in the aftermath of her discoveries, but now, facing Dominic, she realized she was about to take another step deeper into his world. She wasn't just helping him anymore. She was becoming a part of his world. I think so, she said finally, her voice steady. Dominic's lips twitched into a faint smile. You've done more than I expected, he said, his tone filled with something close to admiration. You're not just the maid anymore, Naomi. You're one of us now. Naomi took a breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She had heard them before, but now they felt real. She wasn't just someone in the background, someone who lived in the shadows of the mansion. She was here, in the light, with power and decisions that had consequences. What's the next step? She asked, her voice low but filled with resolve. Dominic paused for a moment, his expression unreadable as he walked over to the desk, running his fingers across the papers Naomi had worked through. The next step is to make sure we don't just play the game, he said, his voice hardening with purpose. We control it. We have the leverage now, Naomi, but we can't let our guard down. We have to use what we know, what you've uncovered, to stay 2 steps ahead. Naomi nodded. She knew this was more than just business. It was a power play, and she was right in the middle of it. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, her words firm. Dominic's gaze met hers, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a kind of approval, maybe even respect. I know you will, he replied, his voice softer now. I'm counting on you. The room was still, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Naomi had always been a survivor. She had learned how to navigate the challenges of life, how to make it through when things seemed impossible. But this was something entirely different. She was in the center of a world where decisions were made in shadows, where alliances shifted like sand, and where every move mattered. She wasn't just playing a part in someone else's story anymore. This was her story too. And now, with Dominic's trust and the power she had unlocked, she had to make sure she could live up to the expectations that came with it. As she walked out of the office, Naomi's mind raced. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of clarity. She was no longer just existing. She was shaping her destiny. And whatever came next, she was ready. Dominic's empire was now hers to help build, and Naomi Carter was determined to make her mark. The weight of her role might have been heavy, but it was also empowering. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone with a purpose, someone who would stop at nothing to prove that she belonged. As she made her way down the hallway, Naomi couldn't help but wonder about the future. She had come so far, but this was just the beginning. The world around her was changing, and so was she. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was in the game, and she would play to win. Naomi sat at her desk, reviewing the last batch of documents Dominic had handed her. The glow from the city lights outside the window reflected on the sleek, polished surface in front of her. Her mind raced, but her fingers moved with a purpose. She was no longer just an observer in the background. She was making decisions that could reshape the future, both for herself and for the powerful empire she had become a part of. The task at hand was monumental. Take the information they had gathered, use it to their advantage, and outmaneuver everyone who had underestimated them. Naomi had spent countless hours combing through contracts, listening to Dominic's strategic briefings, and learning the art of negotiation. But today, something felt different. The room was silent, save for the soft ticking of the clock and the occasional rustle of paper as she shuffled through the files. A part of her wanted to feel the weight of what she was doing, the danger, the risks, but another part of her felt calm, almost empowered. She had always been resourceful, always quick on her feet, but now, she was applying that knowledge in ways she never imagined. Her phone buzzed on the desk, the screen lighting up with a message from Dominic. We move tomorrow. Be ready. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Tomorrow. Everything they had worked for would come to a head. The time for careful observation and planning was over. Now, it was about action. She had seen how Dominic operated, his precision, his focus, and now it was her turn to match that. She wasn't just following his lead anymore. She was contributing, shaping the direction of their next move. The night stretched on as she continued to work, preparing herself for the challenges ahead. The thrill of the game was starting to seep into her, and for the first time, Naomi realized she was beginning to enjoy it. There was a power in understanding the rules and playing by them. The next day arrived too quickly. Naomi dressed carefully, her mind focused and her movements deliberate. She had been through the motions of preparation countless times, but today felt different. Today, she wasn't just going to sit at the table. She was going to make her presence felt. She arrived at the conference room where the meeting was set to take place. The long table gleamed in the bright overhead lights, the chairs neatly arranged around it. The air was thick with the weight of anticipation. Dominic was already there, standing near the window, his back to her. He turned as Naomi entered, his gaze meeting hers. "You're here," he said simply. Naomi nodded, trying to steady her breath, but something about Dominic's steady presence calmed her. She wasn't in this alone. She was with him. "Let's do this," she said quietly, her voice firm. Dominic's lips twitched into a small smile, his eyes filled with an unreadable expression. "I knew you'd be ready," he replied, his voice low and confident. Naomi took a seat beside him, feeling the tension in the room rise. She could feel the eyes of the others as they filed in, businessmen, lawyers, allies, and enemies alike. This was it. The stakes were higher than ever, and Naomi had to stay sharp. The meeting began with the usual pleasantries, the exchange of formalities. But Naomi could feel the shift in the air. This was no ordinary gathering. This was where alliances would be tested and the future would be decided. The rival family was represented by a group of men who carried themselves with an air of arrogance, as if they owned the room. Naomi watched them closely, taking note of every gesture, every word spoken. She knew that Dominic was waiting for the right moment to make his move, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. Every moment that passed brought them closer to a potential confrontation. Finally, the tension in the room became palpable. Dominic leaned forward, his voice calm and steady as he spoke. "We know the game you're playing," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "And we're not interested in playing by your rules anymore. We've seen the contracts. We've seen the lies. And we're not going to let you get away with it." Naomi could feel the intensity in the air as Dominic's words hung in the room. This was the moment. This was where everything they had worked for would come together. She watched as the rival family's representatives exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence faltering for the first time. Dominic didn't give them time to recover. He placed a folder on the table in front of him, its contents carefully selected. "These are the facts," he said, sliding the folder toward them. "Every lie you've told, every deal you've made in the dark. We have it all." Naomi could see the shift in the room. The tension that had once been thick with confidence was now replaced with uncertainty. The power dynamic had shifted. They were no longer in control. They had underestimated Dominic and Naomi. And now, they were paying the price. Dominic's voice grew colder as he continued. "You have one choice. Walk away now, or face the consequences of your actions." Naomi felt a surge of adrenaline course through her as she watched the rival family squirm. She had seen it, the cracks in their armor, the fear they tried to hide. This was their weakness. And now, they were exposed. The silence in the room stretched on, each passing second adding to the weight of the moment. Finally, one of the rival family's representatives spoke, his voice shaky. We didn't know you had this kind of leverage." Dominic's smile was cold, almost imperceptible. "Now you do." Naomi watched as the room shifted, the rivals' confidence completely shattered. It was over. They had won. The power had shifted in their favor. Dominic turned to Naomi, his eyes meeting hers with a sense of approval. "You did well," he said quietly, his voice filled with genuine respect. Naomi smiled, the thrill of victory settling in her chest. She had proven herself. She was no longer just an observer. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the meeting came to a close, Naomi felt a sense of pride. She had played her part, and it had been more than just survival. It had been a victory that would define her future in this world. Dominic stood, motioning for Naomi to follow him. As they walked out of the room, Naomi felt the weight of the world shift beneath her. She wasn't just in this world anymore. She was part of it, and she was ready for whatever came next. Naomi walked out of the conference room, her pulse still racing. From the tense negotiation, the victory was hers and Dominic's. The leverage they had gained over the rival family was palpable, but Naomi could feel the shift in the air, a new weight she had never experienced before. She was no longer just a bystander in this world of power and manipulation. She was becoming a force in it. Dominic walked beside her, his expression unreadable, but Naomi could see the faintest hint of approval in his eyes. She had proven herself in the moment that mattered. The room they had just left had been a battlefield, and Naomi had fought in the only way she knew how, with precision, wit, and the ability to see through the lies that everyone else had missed. "You did good," Dominic said finally, breaking the silence between them. His voice was low, but there was a genuine respect in his words. Naomi turned to look at him, trying to read his face. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady, though she could still feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. They had won, but Naomi knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The weight of what they had accomplished was still sinking in, and she could sense the gravity of the situation as they moved through the corridors of the building. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was an integral part of the empire that Dominic had built. But with that came a new set of challenges, a new set of expectations. They arrived at Dominic's private office, the door sliding open smoothly as they entered. Dominic motioned for Naomi to sit, his movements controlled, deliberate. "This is just the start, Naomi," he said, his voice taking on a darker edge. "We've exposed their weaknesses, but there's more to be done. We can't stop now." Naomi nodded, her mind already shifting to what came next. "What's the next move?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with anticipation. Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Now, we take the offensive. We've got the information we need, but we need to make sure it's not just a win for us. It needs to be a statement, a message." Naomi understood. It wasn't enough to just secure a victory. It had to be something that would change the balance of power, something that would send a message to anyone who thought they could challenge Dominic. She had seen it in his eyes during the meeting, the way he controlled the room with his presence, his words. This was his world, and now it was hers too. "We'll make sure they can't fight back," Naomi said, her voice confident. Dominic looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "Exactly, and I need you to be the one to help me lead this. You've proven yourself." Naomi's heart raced. This wasn't just a victory in a single negotiation. This was about something much larger. She was no longer just following Dominic's lead. She was helping him carve out the future. She was shaping it. The realization hit her like a wave. She was playing the game now, not just watching from the sidelines. She wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready. "I'm ready," she said, her words firm and filled with purpose. Dominic smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made Naomi feel as if she had truly earned her place in this world. "Good, because the next few months are going to test everything we've built." Naomi leaned forward, the excitement of the challenge lighting a fire within her. "I'll be ready for whatever comes next." As the meeting continued, Dominic outlined the next steps. Naomi listened closely, absorbing every detail. There were still rivals to face, still people who would try to undercut them. But now, Naomi understood the full scope of the battle. It wasn't just about the immediate challenges. It was about securing their future, making sure no one could take what they had built. The stakes had been raised, and Naomi was in it, fully immersed in the game. As the days stretched on, Naomi's thoughts raced. She had seen enough to know how ruthless the world could be. But she was no longer an outsider. She was an active player, one who could change the game if she played her cards right. The night fell, and Naomi sat in her quarters, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. She thought about the future, about how far she had come. She had started as a simple maid, cleaning rooms, living in the background, but now, she was part of something bigger. She was part of Dominic's empire. She smiled to herself, a sense of quiet satisfaction filling her chest. She had earned her place. In this world, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, and the future was hers to shape. She stood up, looking out the window at the city below. There were still challenges ahead, still battles to fight, but Naomi was ready. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had stepped into this world, and she was going to make her mark. As the night deepened, Naomi's thoughts sharpened. She wasn't going to let anyone take what was hers. This was her world now, and she was going to dominate it. Naomi stood at the window, staring out at the sprawling city below. The lights of the city stretched endlessly before her, a sea of possibilities and challenges. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman she barely recognized anymore. She had come so far from the woman who had cleaned these rooms and lived in the shadows. Now, She was a part of something much larger, something far more powerful. The weight of her new role was still settling on her shoulders, but she was ready. The meetings, the plans, the moves, they had all led to this point. She had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. As she turned away from the window, Naomi could hear footsteps approaching. It was Dominic, his presence immediately filling the room, as it always did. He was the man who had brought her into this world, who had given her a chance to prove herself. "Naomi," he said, his voice smooth, but with an edge of seriousness. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Naomi nodded, her heart steady despite the anticipation bubbling inside her. "I'm ready," she replied. Dominic gave her a small, approving nod. "Good," he said. "This isn't going to be easy, but we've come a long way. The next step is crucial." Naomi's mind sharpened as she waited for him to continue. "What do we need to do?" she asked. "We need to consolidate our power," Dominic said, his eyes narrowing as he began to pace. "We've shaken the foundation of the rival family, but that's not enough. We need to make sure they can't retaliate. We need to secure our position, not just in this city, but in the wider networks that govern everything. The people who think they control things, those who have stayed in the shadows for far too long, they need to understand that we are in charge now." Naomi's heart raced. She had known that things would escalate, but hearing Dominic lay it out so plainly made everything feel so much more real. This wasn't just about making deals anymore. This was about dominating the game. "How do we do that?" she asked, her voice steady. Dominic paused, his eyes meeting hers with a calculating look. "You're going to help me with the next phase. You've seen how they operate. You know the kind of manipulation they use, the ways they keep people in line. Now, we do the same, but smarter. We don't play by their rules. We make our own." Naomi felt the weight of the responsibility settle on her. She wasn't just a participant anymore. She was a key player in a game that could change everything. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice firm, her resolve unshakable. Dominic studied her for a moment, his eyes assessing her with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and empowered at the same time. "I know you will," he said quietly. "But this will require more than just strategy. It requires trust. The people we're about to face, they'll stop at nothing. And we can't afford to hesitate." Naomi took a deep breath. The stakes had always been high, but now, they were higher than ever. She had seen enough to understand the ruthlessness of the world she was now a part of. "I trust you," she said, her voice unwavering. Dominic gave her a small smile, the first real one she had seen in days. "Good. Because I trust you too." The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and preparations. Naomi found herself in the heart of everything, strategizing with Dominic, reviewing contracts, making calls, and keeping a close eye on every move their rivals made. It was exhilarating, and at times, exhausting. But Naomi had never felt more alive. She was no longer the maid. She was an integral part of the operation, trusted to help shape their future. As the final pieces of their plan fell into place, Naomi could feel the tension in the air. They were about to make their move, the one that would solidify their power. It was the kind of move that would send a message, one that no one could ignore. Dominic's voice interrupted her thoughts. "It's time," he said, his tone calm, but filled with purpose. Naomi nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. This was it. This was the turning point. She had prepared for this. She had learned everything she needed to know. Now it was time to act. As they walked into the meeting room, Naomi could feel the eyes of the others on her. The rivals were seated at the table, their faces betraying their uncertainty. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. Dominic took his seat at the head of the table, and Naomi stood beside him, her presence strong and steady. The room grew quiet as Dominic spoke, his voice low but commanding. "You've underestimated us," he said, his eyes sweeping across the room. "You thought you could control the game. But we've seen your moves, and we're one step ahead." Naomi watched as the rival family's representatives shifted uneasily in their seats. The power was shifting. Dominic placed a thick file on the table, pushing it forward. "This is the proof," he said. "The proof of your lies, your manipulation, and your betrayal. And now, it's our turn to take control." Naomi's heart pounded as she watched the reactions around the table. The tension in the room was palpable, but she knew they had won. The moment had come, and they had played it perfectly. Dominic turned to Naomi, his gaze meeting hers with an almost imperceptible nod. She had done it. She had helped secure their victory. The battle wasn't over, but this was a major victory. The power had shifted, and Naomi was no longer just a spectator. She was a key player in this world of power, strategy, and dominance. As the meeting ended, Naomi followed Dominic out of the room, her heart still racing with the adrenaline of the moment. "You did well," Dominic said quietly. "You've earned your place here." Naomi smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. She wasn't just part of this world anymore. She was shaping it, and she was ready for whatever came next. Naomi sat in her office, the weight of the recent events settling over her like a heavy blanket. The meeting with the rival family had been a turning point, a victory that had secured Dominic's position and sent a clear message to everyone who had underestimated them. Yet, despite the triumph, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was still ahead. The power dynamics had shifted, but the road ahead would be filled with more challenges, more decisions that could change everything. She wasn't naive enough to believe that this was the end. It was only the beginning. She had seen what lay behind the curtains of power, the deals made in dark corners, the hidden motives that drove the people around her. But now, Naomi was part of it all. She was no longer just a passive player. She was integral to the plan, someone whose decisions mattered just as much as Dominic's. The phone on her desk buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up, glancing at the screen. It was a message from Dominic. "We need to talk. Meet me in my office." Naomi's pulse quickened, a familiar tension rising in her chest. She knew what this meant. It was time to take the next step. She stood up, smoothing the front of her dress, trying to push aside the nerves that had been gnawing at her. She was ready, she told herself. She had to be. As she entered Dominic's office, she found him standing by the window, looking out over the city. His posture was relaxed, but there was a sharpness in his eyes, the kind that Naomi had come to recognize as the precursor to something important. He turned as she entered, giving her a small nod. "Naomi," he said, his voice steady. "Sit down. We need to discuss the next phase." Naomi nodded and took a seat across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had already proven herself once, but this time, the stakes were higher. "What's the next move?" she asked, her voice calm despite the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Dominic walked over to his desk and picked up a folder, sliding it across the table to her. "This is where we go from here," he said. Naomi opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. It was a list of names, a map of connections, and a strategy for the next series of moves. "We've dealt a blow to the rival family," Dominic continued. "But that's only one piece of the puzzle. Now, we need to solidify our position and make sure no one tries to undermine us again." Naomi nodded as she studied the documents. The names on the list were familiar. These were the people Dominic had been carefully maneuvering around for months. But now, the stakes were higher. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She was making decisions. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady. Dominic looked at her, his eyes sharp. "I need you to use everything you've learned. You've seen how the game is played. Now, it's time to play it our way." Naomi felt the weight of his words settle in. She had already proved her worth, but this was a different level of involvement. She wasn't just going to be a strategist. She was going to be part of the execution, helping to shape the future. "I understand," she said, "but I need to know, what exactly are we dealing with here? Who are we up against?" Dominic's expression hardened slightly, his gaze flicking to the papers in front of him. "We're up against people who think they can control the city, people who have too much power and too many connections. But what they don't realize is that they're already losing. We just need to make sure they don't realize it until it's too late." Naomi looked up at him, meeting his gaze. She had seen the way he operated, the way he thought strategically, always staying a step ahead of everyone else. And now, it was her turn to do the same. She had learned from the best. "I'll get to work on this immediately," Naomi said, standing up and gathering the documents. Dominic smiled slightly, the first real sign of approval she had seen from him in days. "I know you will," he said. "We need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more chances they'll have to regroup. We can't afford that." Naomi nodded, a sense of determination settling in her chest. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The pieces were in place. Now, it was time to execute. She left Dominic's office with a clear sense of purpose, her mind already running through the plan. She would need to pull all the threads together, track the people on the list, and start working on the next phase of their strategy. It wasn't just about defending their position anymore. It was about dominating the game. Naomi had always been someone who could think on her feet, who could navigate the twists and turns of life with ease. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about taking control. She walked through the halls of the mansion, her mind racing with the possibilities. The world she had stepped into was filled with danger, yes, but it was also filled with opportunity. And Naomi was ready to seize it. As she made her way back to her office, she felt a surge of confidence. She wasn't just the woman who had helped expose a deadly clause. She was the woman who was going to help reshape everything. She had earned her place here. And now, she was going to make sure no one forgot it. Naomi sat at her desk, her mind racing through the series of events that had brought her to this moment. The stakes had never been higher. They had made their move against the rival family, but Naomi knew that this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that would test everything she had learned and everything she had become. Dominic had entrusted her with an essential role, and with that came a new level of responsibility, one that she could not afford to ignore. She wasn't just playing a part in this world anymore. She was shaping it. Every decision she made now would reverberate through the empire they were building. Naomi ran her fingers over the documents in front of her, her eyes scanning each word carefully. She had seen how the rival family had tried to manipulate the game, hiding their true intentions beneath layers of deception. But Naomi had already exposed their lies. Now, she had to ensure that their downfall would be complete. She had to be strategic, smarter than ever before. She couldn't afford any missteps. The phone on her desk buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up and saw Dominic's name on the screen. She knew that this call was important. Naomi, Dominic's voice came through the line, calm and commanding. It's time to take the next step. Naomi's pulse quickened, her mind immediately focusing. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice steady, masking the excitement building inside her. We've dealt the first blow, Dominic said, his voice low. But we need to secure our position. We can't just sit back and wait for them to retaliate. We need to outmaneuver them before they even realize what's happening. Naomi nodded as she listened closely, mentally preparing herself for whatever was to come next. What's the next move? She asked, already piecing together the puzzle in her mind. We're going to use the information we have. The documents you've uncovered. They're the key to solidifying our power. But we need to be subtle. We can't reveal everything at once. We need to control the narrative, shift the momentum in our favor, and make sure our enemies are left with no room to fight back. Naomi's heart raced as she processed his words. This was the strategy Dominic had been working toward all along. He wasn't just about winning battles. He was about shaping the entire game. She had learned from him, and now, it was her turn to help him lead. I'm ready, Naomi said, her voice filled with determination. Dominic was silent for a moment before replying. I know you are. But remember, Naomi, this isn't just about playing it safe. This is about being decisive. We need to take action now, before they can regroup. We can't afford hesitation. Naomi took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. She had been waiting for a chance to prove herself, and now she had it. This was the moment that would define everything. I'll take care of it, Naomi said, her voice firm. She ended the call and set the phone down, her mind already racing with plans. She had no time to waste. Every minute counted. The next few days were a blur of meetings, strategizing, and executing their plan. Naomi was at the center of it all, carefully coordinating every move with precision. She had become more than just a trusted advisor. She was now a critical part of the operation. The power they had fought for was within reach, but Naomi knew better than to think it would come easily. There were still obstacles, still enemies who would do whatever it took to stay in control. But Naomi had learned how to navigate this world. She had seen it all, the manipulation, the backstabbing, the power plays. And now, she was ready to make her own move. As the days passed, Naomi's confidence grew. She knew the people they were up against. She understood the weaknesses in their plan, the cracks that could be exploited. But she also understood the stakes. She wasn't just playing for herself anymore. She was playing for Dominic, for the empire they were building, and for the future she could see clearly before her. On the morning of the final move, Naomi stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her jacket. She had been through countless moments like this before, Moments where everything hinged on one decision, one action. But this was different. This time, it was her decision to make. She had worked tirelessly to get here, and now it was time to execute. She took a deep breath, staring at her reflection for a moment. She wasn't just Naomi Carter anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. She was a player in this game. Naomi stepped out of her office, ready to take control of the next phase. The path ahead was uncertain, but Naomi knew one thing for sure. She was no longer afraid. She had taken her place at the table, and she was going to make sure everyone knew she belonged there. As she walked through the halls, her thoughts focused on the task at hand. She knew that she had come too far to let anything stop her now. She had proven herself, and now it was time to prove to everyone else that she was not just a part of the world Dominic had built. She was going to shape it, to lead it, and to make sure their victory was final. Naomi walked into the conference room, her steps confident, her presence commanding. As she took her seat beside Dominic, she looked around at the gathered people, the players in this game of power and influence. She was ready for whatever came next. The battle was far from over, but Naomi was prepared to see it through to the end.